Welcome back to the channel. I'm Nate. Today we're going to talk about this little powerhouse right here. It's a little powerhouse. Okay, so I thought we'd take the episode outside today. It's beautiful, absolutely lovely, and we were talking about Fuji 16mm 1.4. This is by far my favorite lens, and I'm going to walk through a number of reasons why. This has very quickly become one of the key lenses that I leave on my Fuji, kind of wherever I go. It doesn't matter what I shoot or where I shoot, and it's kind of my go-to lens. Okay, so first of all, it would have to be size. Just look at that. It's super portable. It is very easy to kind of take with you wherever you go, and I consistently leave it on the camera, and I find myself not having to remove it from the body at all to kind of store it in my backpack whenever I go out to shoot something. So size for me, portability is a really big plus, really big bonus. It's something that I consistently rely on because it doesn't take up a whole lot of space in my backpack. So the next reason for me is the aperture. This is a 1.4, and that's by far my lowest aperture lens that I have of all the Fuji lenses that I have. Now the f1.4 does a couple things for me. Number one, it gives the sensor a lot of light. So since this is just a APS-C style camera, it doesn't have a full frame sensor. Giving the sensor as much light as possible is really important, and this lens does just that. The other thing that the 1.4 allows is that really nice bokeh separation from foreground and background that you're really looking for when you're looking for that really buttery smooth background image. So 1.4, it's a great aperture length. If you leave it wide open at a 1.4 and you have a really close subject, just be aware that the focus point is pretty pinpoint. If you have it completely open, you might end up leaving the rest of your subject out of focus. Something to be aware of, but typically, since it's such a wide lens as a 16mm, if you're shooting any sort of landscape photography or video, the entire image is going to be pretty tack sharp. So speaking of focus point, that kind of leads me to my next benefit of this lens is actual focus distance from the lens to the subject that you're filming. Now this is in no way a macro lens, but the reason why I like it, you can get as close to a subject as my Fuji macro 80mm lens can. The focus point on this lens is actually really close. So while again this is not considered a macro lens, the images and detail that you can end up getting being so close to a subject almost make it seem or have the feel of a macro lens, which is something it not only provides a unique point of view, but it gives you that flexibility to kind of change up what sort of subjects you're wanting to film or shoot. So speaking of detail, this lens is super sharp. I think the only other lens that I have of Fuji's that is slightly sharper is the 50mm, but this 16mm, it doesn't matter if you're up close to a subject or if you're doing a wide shot, it retains detail very well. What I like about it though is the detail doesn't seem digital. It still seems organic, it still seems natural, but even on a 26 megapixel camera, you can retain a lot of detail in a lens like this. And the last benefit, of course, being out in the field is it's weather resistant. So it's got weather sealing on it. It's got kind of the rubber gaskets around the joints, which is super helpful. I've taken this out on snowy days, some rainy days. It's held up just fine. The weather resistance gives you that ability to obviously take it out and be comfortable in whatever environment you shoot in. Gear like this, as expensive as it is, in my personal opinion, is to be used and not just kind of sit up on a shelf in a pristine condition. These are built and made to be used as much as possible so that you can create as much as possible. So the only real con that I have for this lens, you might have already guessed it, but it's optical image stabilization. So of course, I've said this before, I'm saying it again, Fuji X-T3 does not have IBIS. This lens does not have image stabilization either. It's really unfortunate. I mean, this lens, to be honest, if it had optical image stabilization, would be a solid 10 out of 10 lens for me for just how versatile it is. But the fact that it doesn't have stabilization built into it is really kind of a bummer. So whenever I use this lens, when I'm doing any sort of video shoot, I typically will have the camera on a stabilizer or a gimbal to compensate for those shakes. Since I do mostly video stuff, I typically won't shoot or can't shoot with this lens handheld, especially if you're looking at stock video, because again, it's really important that you retain that smooth footage. So that's really the only gripe that I have about this lens is not stabilized. Well, thanks for checking out the video. That's all I had for today. I hope you enjoyed the change of scenery. I know I did. It's a little chilly out here, but I just wanted to get out of the basement for a little bit. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, and leave a comment. I'd love to interact with you. I will see you on the next video. Cheers. By the way, how do you like this image quality? This is the first YouTube shoot on the S1H that I unboxed in my last video. Let me know if you like it. I'm digging it so far. I think it's really good, but official review to be done later. I'm gonna hold out on that and not give you any spoilers about what my thoughts are on this new Lumix S1H.